Alrighty, folks, now we're going to talk more about sevenths and sixth chords. Okay? And we're going to use A as our prototype, but remember that you can do this in anything. And we're going to introduce a few concepts such as diminished and half diminished. So once you have familiarized yourself with a major scale, this method and this pattern is going to let you move between a major 7, a dom 7, half diminished, and fully diminished sevenths chords in your brain, hopefully a lot easier. It helped me first time I was taught this. I think there's a chart out of a textbook. I certainly didn't come up with this, and thanks to whoever did way back in the day. And so let's dig into this. Now, in the previous video, we said that how you build a seventh chord was basically addition of 4 notes. So your first note would be addition of but to do that we have to remember what an A major is, and so let's do that now. So first we got to go to our scale. Always go to your scale, and so this is going to be an A major scale. A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, and so on. And now let's number these notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 equals 1, and so on. Let's start back over. Now, A major scale. Now, to make an A major chord, we have to pull out the 1, the 3, and the 5. And so, A major we talked about equals 1 plus 3 plus 5, and that's really any major chord, G major, B major, just name any of these letters and say major. You go to the first, the third, and the fifth note in that scale, the major scale. You put them together, and you have that major chord. Okay? So for A major, the 1, 3, and the 5 are going to be A plus C sharp plus 5 is E. Good. Now, to turn this into A major 7, what are we going to do? Well, we better add on a 7th note. So we keep our A major, and then we just add on the 7th. If you're adding on an A major 7th, which one are you going to add on? How about the 7th note? And so that's G sharp. G sharp. And so when you put together these notes right here, you're playing an A major 7. The good news is that we can use a pattern to think about the other 7th chords that are pretty much, all of them that use these just 4 notes, and we can have a helpful trick that helps us know what notes are here without having to memorize all the various scales. And so what I mean by that is this. Let's look at this pattern. 1, 3, 5, 7. 1, 3, 5, flat 7. 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7, and then 1, flat 3, flat 5, and the idea of, watch this, a flat, flat 7. Now you might ask, where does this come from? Or maybe you see what I'm doing here is that we're just changing the major scale to in these particular ways. Okay. So using this pattern, we're able to pretty quickly gather the notes of a bunch of seventh chords in our mind. And what I mean by that is this. Watch. So we know how to make a major 7. Okay? We just take our A major, we take the 1, 3, and 5 from an A major chord, do nothing to it, and then add a 7th chord from the A major scale, and we do nothing to it. And then that creates a major 7. If we do it out of A, like we did up here, that creates an A major 7. If we do it out of G, that creates a G major 7. In the last video, we also talked about this idea of a dominant 7. And that pattern is you take the 1, the 3, and the 5 of whichever scale you've got. So in this case, 1, 3, and 5. And then once you get to the 7th, what do you do to it? You make it 1/2 step flatter. G sharp, make it a little flatter to G, 1/2 step. And that creates a dominant 7. So in this case, it would be A, C sharp, E, G. Also notice though, you've got a pattern started here. It's that if you remember the pattern of the one up top, each one is only going to change by one note, for instance, and you keep what come before. And so this pattern here, 1 flat 3, 5 flat 7, is going to be a minor 7. And if you remember when we talked about minor 7s, we take our one note is an A, good. Our third note in A major is a C sharp, but this pattern says to create the minor 7, what do we do to that C sharp? We flatten it by 1/2 step, which moves it back to C. We take the same 5 from the major scale, and we use the same 7 that we did in, we use the same flatted 7 that we did to create the dominant 7. And so what do we have here? We have A, C, E, and G. And we arrived at it this way, and if you go back to the other video, you'll see that you can count up, you can write out the A minor scale, and in taking the 1, 3, 5, and 7 of the A minor scale, you'll arrive at the same notes. But this is a way to just have to memorize an A major scale and be able to quickly think about what notes change, so you can quickly arrive at which notes make up the minor 7 without having to think about all these different scales. So next up is we're going to introduce this concept, and I just want to say it here. If you're doing jazz or some of this jazz manouche or gypsy jazz or Django, Reinhardt music, jams, you'll see this a lot, and so I just want to introduce it. This idea of a half diminished. Okay? Half diminished. there's a D there. All right, half diminished. A half diminished is a 7th chord, okay? And what you'll see is that it's the same thing as a minor 7, okay? So we take the 1, the flat 3, and the flat 7. So those stay the same, here, here, and here. But the change we're making now to make the half diminished is we flatten the 5. Okay, so what if we went to the 5th note? And so we know the 1, 3, and 5 are staying the same. So that's going to be A, C, or 1, 3, and 7, sorry, A, C, and G. And so what are we changing here? As compared to the one up top, the 5. We've got to flatten that. Out of A major, your 5 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. E, we flatten that E a half step per this formula, and so we come up with E flat. And so when you put those notes together, it's going to create an A half diminished. Okay? And when you're talking about, now this is going to be a fully diminished 7. So, or you could just call it a diminished 7. 7, okay? And by this, all we have to do is remember that compared to the half diminished, if we know that, all we have to do is start back over at the spot where we started flattening things. And so up here to get from a major 7 to a dominant 7, the first thing we flattened in this pattern was a 7. And so we've made it through the other numbers. You can't flatten the 1 because then you'd be in a totally different scale. And so we keep the 1 the same, and we just move back over to flatten the 7 again. And so A in this case, we know it's going to be the same as what came before. We're going to have a flat 3, flat 5. The 1, flat 3, and flat 5 are going to stay the same. Okay, 1, flat 3, flat 5. As compared to the major scale. Just quickly to run through that process again. The 1 is going to be A here, if we're out of A. So we have A. The regular 3 out of the A major scale will be C sharp. So we move that back a half step to C. The 5th note out of the A major scale is E. By this pattern, we move it back a half step to E flat or D sharp, same thing. And then for the 7th, we're going to flatten it twice, 2 half steps. So we would go to, we know that the 7th note here in the A major scale is G sharp. So we would start there and we'd go back 1 half step and then another half step. And so that's going to be F sharp or G flat. Okay? So that pattern is the way to quickly memorize what notes make up all of these different 7th chords. That's why I love this pattern. It's because you can start with a major, and if you just remember, let's say a minor 7 is 1, flat 3, 5, flat 7, then any major scale that you've memorized is an immediate window, is an immediate wormhole, so to speak, to get you into a minor 7 chord, because you're just going to flatten the 3rd note and flatten the 7th note, and then use the regular 1 and regular 5 that you normally find there, and you're playing a minor 7 chord note. And so it's all about finding easy ways to get get notes in your head and understand what notes you should be playing at a particular time. The next thing I want to talk about quickly, and I don't think it's going to be a surprise since you talk about 7th chords, okay? So the idea of sixth chords. Okay, sixth chords. What do you think that might be? So if you want to make a sixth, or if you want to make a A major, if you want to make an A major 7, you would just add the seventh note onto your 3 notes to make up your A major. And so to make an A, you'll often see it just written like an A6. But to do that, all you have to do is, instead of adding the 7th, how about just adding the 6th note? Okay? So we've got 6th equals 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus 6 instead of 7. 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus 6. And so for A, what would we have? We'd have the same 1, 3, 5. The A, C sharp, E, plus what note? F sharp. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you play the A, C sharp, E, F sharp together, you've got a sixth chord. And then there's lots of variations on all these chords. And you can have, say, a ninth added on. Just really quickly, we can talk about those sorts of ideas. If you add on a ninth, what does that mean? Well, all it means is, what if you just kept counting? What if you didn't stop at 8 here? What if you went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? What would be next? Well, B would be next. And what could you call that? Instead of calling it 2, if you called A 8 here, what would B be? B would be 9. And so, out of the key of A, it's just really adding on the note after A. It's adding a B into whatever concoction you have here. So if you're playing a A dominant 7 with a 9 added in, you can, whenever you start adding in more and more notes, things start getting more and more jazzy, more and more complicated, and it's very rarely used in the same ways. It's lovely and it's important and it's awesome, but that's the basis of what you're talking about, is that you're adding a particular number into your chord. And so if you're adding on, you can add on a ninth onto a major 7. You can add on, let's say, what if you added on, if we an 11th, what would that be? Well, in this case, the A, if you count through, it'd be A 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, get you back to A. But let's just keep counting. So not B would be 9, and I'm going to go down this way just to keep it simple. B is 9. 10 would be C sharp. 11 would be D. 12 equals E. 13 equals F sharp. 14 equals G sharp. And so if you added on, say, a D note here, well, you'd be adding on an 11th note. So you'd count up 11 notes higher. So this is, you go ahead and go through one octave and keep going up, and you're going to be adding on a D note. So it's similar to just adding on a fourth, except it's going to be a whole octave higher. And so if you see 11th, just understand they're just talking about a D note out of A, or you can apply this to any scale. If you see, 13th, just understand that they're talking about the same note as the 6th note, just at the higher pitch up. The 11 would correspond to 4, and the 9 here, the 9 would correspond to the 2. Okay? And so that's how to think about more advanced chords. I'm going to stop there, and because I think that's more than enough to get anybody started in getting out there in this, being able to practically use theory in chord formation. And so thanks everybody, and we're going to continue talking about some theory in the next video. Bye-bye.